Well, welcome back, and we're going to start discussing the holiday of Sukkot now, since the holiday is upon us. So, from Rosh Hashanah, we went to Yom Kippur. From Yom Kippur, we go to Sukkot, which begins, let's see, today is the 11th. So, Wednesday would be the 12th. I think Friday night, right? Yeah, Friday night we begin Shabbat and the 2 days of Sukkot. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what is Sukkot? And we all know what Sukkot is. Sukkot, or Sukkot, whichever way you pronounce it, is the holiday that commemorates the journey of the Jewish people in the desert for 40 years. And specifically, the protection that God gave them with his clouds of glory. Shaded the Jewish people in the desert for 40 years. So we give gratitude and thanks to Hashem for sheltering and protecting our ancestors for 40 years in the desert, so we could survive our journey in the land to the land of Israel, which, because of the sin of the spies, ended up being extended to 40 years in the desert. So that's what the holiday commemorates. Having said that, the obvious question is, it seems that this holiday is out of place, because we all know the Jews left Egypt on the holiday of Passover, which is in 6 months from now. So therefore, logically, right after we finish Passover, we should go into the holiday of Sukkot, because after the Jews left Egypt, they started their journey in the desert. Yet we had two other major festivals. We had Passover and then Shavuot. Then we had Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And now all of a sudden we have the holiday of Sukkot. Why is Sukkot being observed at this time of the year? And here rabbis give us a beautiful answer. And this answer pertains to Sukkot, but really pertains to every mitzvah. There's two parts of every mitzvah, amongst other parts. The first part is the actual performance. And in our tradition, we're taught that the main thing is action. So for example, if you give a poor man charity, he doesn't really care what thoughts you're having. I mean, it's nice if you have positive thoughts towards him, but the main thing is he got the help he needs. So too with every commandment. The most essential part is the action, because the action is what makes a difference. Having said that, our rabbis say something beautiful in the Talmud. They say a mitzvah without focus, without thought, without feeling, without concentration is like a body without a soul, which means it's lifeless. It's missing vitality. It's lacking life force. So when we do a mitzvah, we always have to try to have what is called kavanah. The literal meaning of the word kavanah is direction. Direction means where are my thoughts directed towards when I do this mitzvah? So we have to breathe some life into our mitzvahs by thinking about the meaning behind the mitzvah. So for example, when you go into your sukkah, if you ate in the sukkah, you did the mitzvah, even if you weren't thinking about why you're sitting and eating in the sukkah. But obviously, the ideal way to perform the mitzvah is to think about, why am I doing this mitzvah? And what should you be thinking? Oh, I'm remembering that over 3 millenniums ago, our ancestors journeyed through the desert, and God, in his kindness and compassion, took the Jews out of Egypt during the springtime when the weather was beautiful. But he took them on a journey for many, many years. And he provided them with shelter, with protection, with clouds of glory. So knowing that enhances and elevates the performance of the mitzvah, because the purpose of the mitzvah is to remember the kindness of Hashem. And when you think about God's kindness, there's a great line I've always loved. It says, when you appreciate something, it appreciates in value. So we have many valuable blessings in our life, but if you don't think about it and appreciate it, it doesn't take on an appreciation, a heightened value. But when you dwell on something, you focus on something, you meditate on something, you think about something, including your breathing, right? You start appreciating it, and it actually appreciates in value. Therefore, when you sit in the sukkah, you should think about God's kindness, that he protected the Jews from all the elements in the desert, most notably the shade that he provided from the sunlight, the brutal heat. And that's why the most critical element of the sukkah is the shade that the schach provides overhead. And that's why the law is that it has to be more shade than sunlight, because the goal is to have shade and protection. So our rabbis say something beautiful. Our rabbis say, you know, in the springtime when the weather's nice, people tend to go outdoors. When it's wintertime and it's rainy season, people tend to go indoors. So the natural time for Sukkot to occur would have been right after Passover, because that's the time of the year the Jews went into the desert. But if Jews left their home in the springtime, which on the English calendar is around the time of April, May, when the weather's turning beautiful, and they started going outdoors into huts or tents or what we call gazebos, people wouldn't really be thinking about the mitzvah. They would be thinking about the weather. Oh, it's beautiful weather. Let's go eat outdoors. Let's have a barbecue. Let's have a picnic. Let's go out and sit in the beautiful weather. And they would fail to focus on the real reason why they're doing this, which is to remember the miracle of Hashem. So therefore, our rabbis, or I shouldn't say the rabbis, actually the Torah, but the rabbis explain this, postpone the mitzvah for 6 months, a 6-month delay, and say, you know what? The truth is the Jews were in the desert for 40 years, so they sat in the shade of the sukkah all year round. So why not do the mitzvah at this time of year? Because this time of year is when the weather starts getting chilly, cold, nippy, or wet, and people are leaving the outdoor environment to go to the indoor shelter of their homes. And everyone is going indoors, and we, the Jews, are going outdoors, and that raises the question why, and the answer becomes obvious. Oh, we're not doing what everyone else is doing, which is going indoors. We're heading outdoors because we are going to perform the mitzvah of Sukkot, and we have to ask ourselves, why would I go outdoors? It's getting cold outside, and again, in Florida, it's hot. But we go after the seasons of Israel, and then it becomes obvious why we're doing the mitzvah. And that's why I said this pertains to every mitzvah. You know, one of the dangers, or maybe one of the pitfalls of anything that we do repeatedly, is that we forget sometimes to think about what we're doing, and we just do it automatically by rote. We all know that human beings are able to develop habits. Now, habits could be a good thing or a bad thing. Bad habits are obviously bad, but good habits are good. If you train yourself to habitually do certain good behaviors, right? Whether in any regard, whether it's exercise, whether it's eating, whether it's how you treat other people, how your politeness, you know, it becomes second nature, and you don't have to put so much effort into it. It becomes instinctive. It becomes like tying your shoelaces, and then. But the negative side of that is that just like when you tie your shoelaces, your mind could be wandering elsewhere, and you don't even realize you just tied your shoelaces because your hands move instinctively and automatically, and you just tie your shoelaces, and you don't even realize what you did. You could come to a point where you're putting on your tefillin, and it becomes like tying your shoelaces. You're not even thinking about what you're doing. That's one of the reasons we have what's known as a bracha, a blessing, before we do a mitzvah. We have a blessing because we need to take a moment to stop and think about what we're about to do, to focus our thoughts. So that's the holiday that is upon us, the holiday of Sukkot. Now, I'm going to tell you something that may come as a surprise to you, but we'll first tell you what it is and then talk about why it is. If I were to ask you a trivia question, from all the holidays in the Torah, which holiday does the Torah define as the happiest holiday? Now, of course, all holidays by definition are happy, meaning that we are commanded to rejoice and celebrate on every holiday, because every holiday commemorates something positive that we're celebrating. But from all of the holidays, which one is considered the happiest? Anyone want to venture a guess? We're an intimate group, so you could either say it or you could type it in, whatever your preference is. Sukkot, there you go. The holiday of Pesach is called Man, the time of our freedom, the season of our. The holiday of Shavuot is called Zman Torasenu, the season of reading the Torah. This holiday is called the time of our rejoicing. And the question is, why from all the holidays? I mean, going out of Egypt is a pretty happy occasion. Getting the Torah is a pretty happy occasion. Why is the holiday of getting shelter, although it is great and miraculous, why is that considered the time of our rejoicing? Above and beyond all the other times of our rejoicing. And there are many answers. A very practical, down-to-earth, simple answer is that it also happens to coincide with the time of the harvest. It's called Chag HaAsif. And everyone knows harvest time is a joyous time. You know, for some people, the first of the month is a happy time because they get their paycheck, or whenever they get their paycheck. In the olden days, you worked all the year as a farmer, and once a year you harvested all your crop and your grain. And if it was successful and you had a good harvest and you had a good year and you whatever you planted grew and there was no devastation of the crop or no flooding and everything went well, you were happy because your grain houses, storehouses were filled with food and sustenance and livelihood. So that's the natural reason why it is the time of rejoicing. But to offer two other reasons that take it beyond the physical to something, and that is as follows. Second reason is that you see there are two types of miracles in our lives. One is one that we don't participate in. It just comes unexpectedly without any human effort. Now, there's of course various degrees of human effort. So having a baby is clearly a miracle, but it does require some human effort. But the human effort is very minuscule, so we see it as an unbelievable miracle because, yes, we created the conception and the mother carried the baby, but the baby was formed and designed almost entirely by God, so it's a great miracle. Then there are miracles that just come to us as like a windfall. Maybe you bought a lottery ticket, but you won. It's like a miracle. You won out of millions and millions of people, 100 million people, you won the lottery. But then there are miracles that you were really a partner creating it. Yes, it was a supernatural occurrence. Yes, it required divine intervention, but you really put a lot of effort into it. And the question is, which miracles bring greater joy to a person? A miracle that a person played no part. Whoever's unmuted, if you could please mute yourself. A miracle that you did not have any role in, it just came to you as a gift from above, or a miracle that you had to toil and put effort into creating, and it was a partnership between you and God. Well, obviously, most people would say a miracle that you played a role in initiating it or creating it or bringing it about, you have a greater, deeper satisfaction in the outcome because you know that it was your efforts that you could be proud of, that you helped create this miracle in your life. Now, when you look at the Exodus from Egypt, 10 plagues, splitting of the sea, that's something the Jews stood by and witnessed as God performed for them. The giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, of course, we received it, but God decided to come down and choose us and grant us His Torah. But when it comes to Sukkot, the Jewish people, had tremendous faith to follow God into the desert. And as the prophet says, God says, I'll always remember the kindness of your youth, that you followed me into a barren wasteland and you trusted me. But furthermore, there are two dimensions to Sukkot. The first one is that the Jews had to build huts to survive in the desert for 40 years. And then God put the clouds of glory above them. So therefore, what you have is a double layer of Sukkot, the natural ones that they built and the supernatural ones that God created. And there's actually a dispute in the Talmud, what is the primary commemoration, the ones that the Jews built or the ones that God provided? But the one way to look at it is a combination of both. And in this sense, Sukkot is really a metaphor for the Jewish people journeying through the desert of, we are called the wandering Jews by the Christians. And indeed, we have been wandering from one nation to the other. And like the Sukkah, our dwelling has always been temporary. And it has always been subject to various conditions, environments, winds, storms. And we've been uprooted time and again. And when you look at Jewish history, which is, going back to Abraham, it's 3,800 years, but from the Exodus, it's 3,300 years. You say, wow, this tiny little nation, smaller than any other nation on earth, not only survived for 3,300 years, but thrived for 3,300 years, in spite of all of our losses and our tragedies and misfortune. And you say, how did this happen? What is the explanation how do you understand Jewish survival? It defies all reason, all logic, all odds, all statistics. And it ultimately comes down to a combination of Jewish resilience and determination and faith in God, which clearly Jewish history is replete with, but at the same time, it comes down to a divine protection. And like the holiday of Sukkot, we celebrate not just the miraculous first 40 years of our existence, but almost 4,000 years of existence from the time of Abraham. And we say we're only here for the reason of the holiday of Sukkot. We did our part as a nation to remain tenacious in our adherence to God and his Torah and never yield to pressures of foreign entities that try to destroy us and annihilate us time and again and again and again and again and again in every generation, as we say in the Haggadah. But also, there's clearly a divine power at play that we could even see in the modern state of Israel's existence for the past 72 years in our own generation. So, like the Sukkah, we have a lot to be grateful for and a lot to celebrate. So that's the second reason why Sukkot is the time of our rejoicing. But here's one other very practical lesson that I think is so applicable for the 21st century that we're in now. And that is the question of what brings happiness in life, right? The pursuit of happiness. It's a human need or a human desire to be happy. And there is a difference in the Constitution. Happiness is the ultimate goal. In Judaism, I would say happiness is the second highest goal. King David says in the book of Psalms, serve God with joy, because joy will lead to more good. Joy is a catalyst for more positive deeds and activities, because when a person is depressed, they're vulnerable, they're weak, they're dejected, and they don't have the energy and the alertness to be able to achieve their maximum potential. So joy is like a faucet that opens up the full potential of a person. So if you want to just be happy because you want to have a happy life, well, that's okay, but it's a little bit juvenile. It's a little bit selfish. Happiness should be, the happier I am, the more I can share my happiness and spread my happiness to others. So it's a means to an end rather than an end unto itself. And there's many, many books written about happiness and what the source of happiness is. And we could talk for the rest of the day about happiness and how to achieve it. And I'm sure everyone has an idea and a philosophy and an opinion. But one of the questions is can money buy happiness? I'm sure you've heard that question. And there's a lot of jokes about that. It depends if you know where to shop, or, it depends how much money you have, or whatever the answer may be. But I think the general proven research has shown that money does not buy happiness. Clearly, it doesn't. Money can buy relief from certain, money could clearly buy comfort. There's no doubting that. Money can buy a certain amount of pleasure and enjoyment or entertainment. Money could be a relief, a certain basic amount of money that we all need to pay our bills, to have, a shelter, a home, clothing, food. If you don't have these things, obviously you're going to be unhappy because you're going to be starving or you're going to be sleeping in the street, God forbid. But once you have what you need, which is your basic requirements, more money doesn't necessarily make you happier. As someone said, if you're not happy with what you have, how will more of it make you happier? As it says in Ethics of Our Fathers, who's a rich person? One who's happy with their lot. So then the question becomes, okay, money can make you happy. As we see, a lot of people win the lottery and they're back to where they were before. Whatever their baseline happiness was originally, they go back to that more or less within 6 months, a year. And the opposite is true. People who are happy, who go through a challenge, eventually they go back to that baseline of happiness ultimately. But the question then is, okay, if money cannot bring happiness, the other question is, can money bring misery? And yes, Ethics of Our Fathers says if you increase possessions, you actually could increase worry, stress, strife, and many other ills that money can bring. So today we find ourselves in a generation where, thank God, we have more material luxuries and pleasures than any other generation in the history of mankind, and surely for the Jewish people. But what has that money done for us? And while it has brought us comforts and luxuries and pleasures and entertainment, it does have negative side effects. And there's a long list of negative side effects. But with regard to happiness, there's a movement actually today. It's along the lines of, there's books about this. One book is called Essentialism. But there's something called minimalism. Minimalism is that people are saying, you know what? Too much is not good. I just want to have what I need. It's sort of, use a simple analogy. When you go on vacation, some people like to take 8 suitcases with them, you know, for every type of outfit they're going to possibly need, for every condition, every weather, whatever. And other people say, you know what, I just want a little backpack with a couple of, you know, t-shirts and jeans or whatever, and I'm going to go backpacking in Europe. And the logic is simple. Do I want to schlep 8 suitcases wherever I go, or do I want to travel lightly? And just like you could apply that philosophy to a 2-week vacation or a 3-week vacation, you could apply that philosophy to life. There's some people who want to have mega mansions and lots of assets and lots of houses and lots of cars and lots of clothing. And others, you know, that's just a burden. It's just an extra weight to carry around life. I just want to be simplistic. I want to live a more minimalistic lifestyle. And that it's a philosophy that applies not just to material things, but to everything in life, because the less businesses you own, yeah, you'll have less money if you own 1 business versus 6 businesses, but you'll also get a better night's sleep, and you'll have less stress and less worry, and you'll be less harried in life. So along comes the holiday of Sukkot and says, you know what? For 7 or 8 days in the diaspora, 7 days plus Shmini Atzeret, and then there's the 8th day of Simchas Torah, or 9th day, depending where you are. Leave your big, comfortable, luxurious home and live in a simple hut. But when you go into the simple sukkah, surround yourself with your family and friends, with joy, with love, with meaningful, spirited conversations and laughter and joy. And then realize that real joy, meaningful joy, doesn't come from how big your house is. As we saw, people who have been isolated during sheltering at home, social distancing, you could sit in a mansion, but if you're all by yourself, it's not a lot of fun. You'd rather just be out with some friends having a good time somewhere, no matter how simple the environment is. And living in the tent reminds us that all we need really is the basic ingredients of life to be happy: shelter, friends, love, joy, purpose, meaning. And here's where the schach comes in. On your roof in your house, when you look up, you see a beautiful roof, but you don't see the heavens. When you sit in the simple schach with the branches overhead, you look up, you see the heavens above. And the point is, real happiness, especially for a Jew, is looking up to heaven and having faith in God and connecting to something beyond ourselves. And that's really what happiness most probably comes down to ultimately. Having a transcendent meaning and purpose to your life, that your life is not just about the here and now, the physical, because no matter how big and beautiful your physical existence is, it's limited. Only by connecting to something that's unlimited, that's infinite, namely God and his commandments that take us to a higher level, that transcend us to a higher place, can we achieve true and meaningful happiness in our lives. And this is the message of Sukkot, and why Sukkot, from all the holidays, is called the time of our rejoicing. But up until now, we basically discussed one element of Sukkot, which is the Sukkah. But then there's a second component to Sukkot, and that is the commandment to take the Arba Minim, the 4 species, and bring them together and shake them up. And what are the 4 species? The lulav, the date palm branch, the etrog, the citrus fruit, special citron fruit, the willow branches, and the myrtle branches. Now, why do we take things that grow? It goes back to the fact that it's the harvest time. And because it's the harvest time, we want to thank God for our bountiful blessings. But going back to the theme of Sukkot, it's also connected to many other spiritual connections to the holiday of Sukkot. And one is the beautiful midrash. There's actually 2 beautiful midrashes amongst many that talk about the meaning of lulav and esrog, and the 2 go hand in hand. One midrash says that the 4 species represent 4 types of Jews. The other one says it represents 4 parts of the body. The one that says it's the 4 types of Jews says that there are 4 types of Jews. One is the Jew, everything's 4 sons at the Seder, and now we come to Sukkot. 4 types of Jews. 4 types, and this is going to tie into happiness as well, because it is the season of happiness. Everything has to be under the umbrella of happiness. And that is that four types of Jews. You have a Jew who has knowledge of Torah and good deeds. The two dimensions that we have to operate is on study, but then actualizing what we've studied. It's not enough to be an intellectual, to be learned, to be knowledgeable, if you don't act on what you've learned. So the purpose of the Torah is to educate us to be better human beings and act better in this world. If you're only studying and not acting, you're missing the main point. On the other hand, action needs to be infused with understanding, because the more you learn, the more you know what to do and how to do it properly. So these are the two dimensions. So in these two dimensions, you have four categories. You have an etrog Jew, which has fragrance and taste. It's a fruit that's tasty and has a good fragrance. Our rabbis say taste represents knowledge. A person who has knowledge has taste. A person who has a fragrance, they spread a good aroma because of their good deeds. So the etrog Jew is the Jew who's satiated, who's imbued with knowledge and good deeds. Then you have the date palm branch, which has taste but no fragrance. A Jew who's knowledgeable but doesn't act on his knowledge and therefore is lacking good deeds. Then you have the hadas, which is the myrtle branch, has a good fragrance but doesn't have a taste. That's a Jew who has good deeds but not enough knowledge. And then you have the last category, the willow, no taste, no fragrance. A Jew who is lacking in knowledge and in good deeds. And the message is quite powerful. The message is that it's not enough to say, okay, I want to surround myself with only Jews who are etrogs. I only want to be in the company of those who are knowledgeable and good deeds. Why not hang out with the best? Comes the mitzvah of the arba minim, the four species. You need all four categories together. All Jews have to be united. From one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. To use modern day words, and I don't mean to label or define, we have today all these labels, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and they create barriers, they create divisions amongst Jews. What this is saying is from the most ultra Orthodox to the most ultra Reform Jew, whatever that represents. Two ends of the spectrum. You may think these Jews don't have anything in common. The holiday of Sukkot says all those Jews have to come together because it's the unity of the Jewish people that matters most. And it's only by bringing everyone together that each one can gain from each other. And even though the etrog Jew may say, what am I going to learn from the willow Jew? He has none of the above. But trust me, there's a lot to learn from that Jew. And that's why we have to be united. And then again, what does this have to do with joy? Everything. Joy comes from unity, from oneness, from integration of all members of the community and society at large. We all could learn from each other. When we realize in our humility that no matter how much we know, we need each other, just like the head needs the foot. You can't say, well, I'm a head, I'm not going to use the foot. He's just a foot. The foot is what allows the head to carry out what it needs to carry out. We need all levels, all layers, all members of the community. That's number one. Then there's a medrash that says it represents the four parts of the body. The lulav is the spine, like the tall spine. The etrog is the heart. The myrtles are the eyes. If you look at the leaves, they look like eyes, and the willows look like lips. And again, just like we have integration in the nation, integration within the person. We all know that when a person's happy, their whole being dances in the same unison, meaning that happiness is when there is no there's a word for in psychology, dissonance, cognitive dissonance, right? When the brain says one thing and the heart wants to do something else and you feel torn, that's not a happy feeling. Happy feeling is your whole body is in sync. And that's the idea of the four species, the parts of the body, your spine, your heart, your eyes, your lips. It's not like you're saying one thing, but you're seeing something else, but you're not being honest, you're double talking, or your heart feels one thing, that I should do this, but I don't have a spine to act on it, so I cower. No, when your heart feels one way and you stand tall and you speak that way and you see that way, that's unison. But one other idea why this is the holiday of happiness. It's not by coincidence that it comes right after the holiday of Yom Kippur. We have 5 days to get ready, to build a sukkah, to get the four species, to get in gear, but we go straight into it. And our rabbis see this as the aftermath of the holiday of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, we stood in trial. And when someone walks out of a court case and they've been exonerated or been granted freedom, they come out on the court steps and they put up their hands like victory. And that's what we do. We raise our four species and we say victory. We know God, our loving Father in heaven, will grant us a good year. But also we know that one of the greatest sources of pain and anguish in life is when we have regrets and we have guilt. When we know that we didn't do what we were supposed to do. And even if no one else knows, just our conscience bothers us because we say, you know what, I could have done better. I could have had a different reality. My own misdeeds, my poor choices, my bad decisions led me down this path. And sometimes the inner feeling of regret and guilt and remorse over what we've done to ourselves is the greatest pain in life, looking back. And Yom Kippur allows us to ask for forgiveness. And even if we've made mistakes, learn how to love yourself, even though you've made mistakes. And know that God will give you a second chance, and you can be positive and optimistic about the future. And embrace yourself for who you are. And even if you have shortcomings and failings, you never know. Maybe those shortcomings can be stepping stones rather than stumbling stones or blocks to get to something higher. There are many examples in the Torah. To give you a classic one, Levi, the son of Jacob, was cursed on his father's deathbed because of his anger and his wrath. He was the one who, together with Shimon, wiped out all the people of Shechem when their own sister was abducted and violated. And while Jacob rebukes his son Levi, look what happens. Levi's grandson is Moses, who stands up in Egypt to protect the Jews and risks his life for the sake of defending the Jewish people in Egypt from the Egyptian onslaught, ends up rescuing the Jews, saving them, even though he jeopardized his position as a prince in Egypt, ends up redeeming them, taking them out of Egypt, giving them the Torah, and the rest is history. We still study the words of Moshe till this very day. Maybe Moses had some of that anger of his grandfather in him, some of that wrath, some of that righteous indignation, and didn't want to stand silently by as he watched his own brethren being persecuted. So the negative trait of anger of the grandfather was channeled by the grandson into something positive. And you could go throughout history, the Torah and beyond, and see many examples of people who took their shortcomings, took their failings, and I'm sure we could even identify it in our own lives, and turned that negative into something positive. And in that sense, we really don't know what's negative and positive. Of course, we know the Torah tells us what we should do and we shouldn't do. And obviously, there's certain things that are positive or negative. But if God puts something negative in your life, whether it's a human trait, or whether it's a set of circumstances, or whether it's an experience, the way to look at it is, how is that, not that, oh, I'm damaged goods, but how can I embrace that negative experience or that negative circumstance or personality trait and channel it for something good? Because usually everything negative can be utilized for something positive. I love to tell the story of the Kotzker Rebbe, who said, why did God make atheists? If God only makes good things, why would he make this condition that a person could choose to deny the existence of God? Why didn't God just make his appearance evidence so nobody could deny his existence? And Kotzker Rebbe said that when a poor man comes to you for charity, sometimes you may think, you know what, God will help him, and give him a nice blessing. God will help you and send him on his way. And he says, no, at that moment, pretend you're an atheist. There is no God. Either you help this man or nobody's going to help him. It's all up to you. Whatever you do is going to happen. And don't rely on God at that moment. So there's a time to employ different traits. And anger is justified and can be very beneficial sometimes. And there are many, many examples that can be used. We have great rabbis like Rabbi Akiva in the Talmud who didn't study Torah till the age of 40 and became one of the leading rabbis. And maybe it was that thirst for knowledge because he was ignorant and he was illiterate till the age of 40 that made him devote himself to the Torah study with much greater fervor and passion and determination and dedication that led him to become one of the greatest rabbis. So Yom Kippur allows us to reconnect with ourselves, correct any past deeds that can be corrected so that we could actually cleanse ourselves and feel renewed, refreshed. But more than that, even if some of the damage we've done to our lives the mistakes we've made did have a permanent effect. As sad as that is, we could still harness whatever good there is in that, what we've learned, the lessons we've learned from that. I was talking to a woman in our synagogue just on Rosh Hashanah, and she said something that she has amazing kids. And she said something that I never heard a mother say. And it caught me by surprise, but I was very impressed with her way of thinking. I'm not saying I'm at that level, but she said, you know, when my kids go through hardships, when they go through challenges in life, I'm very grateful. And she said, because you don't learn anything from the good times in life. You only learn from the pain, from the hardships, from the challenges. Now, of course, I don't think she was talking about, God forbid, that she wishes her kids, you know, awful tragedies or, God forbid, terrible things. But I think what she was saying is that my kids go through a bump in life, you know. She didn't specify what she was talking about, but, you know, they go through a struggle, they go through a hardship. She said, I'm actually happy because I know those are going to be the greatest moments of learning. And you, to quote her, she said, you only learn from the hard times. When things are going easy, you don't learn anything. And someone just put up here the famous book, I'm trying to remember her name, if you know the name of the author, Blessings of a Skin Knee. You know, when your kid bruises himself, there's a blessing in that. Wendy Mogul, thank you so much. So there's a lot of truth to that. And, you know, obviously we don't want our kids to really fall on hard times, God forbid. But if it's something that they just have to work a little harder to get through, it can actually be a blessing in disguise. And now let's turn that to us and God. We're God's children. And maybe he throws wrenches in our system sometimes, not to give us heartache and pain and aggravation, because what would be the point in that, but for us to maybe dig a little deeper during those times and discover things about ourselves that we wouldn't normally uncover when everything is flowing smoothly and easily in life. So Sukkot is a time to think about rejoicing. It's also a time to think about unity and how the two go together. And one of the things about a sukkah is that, you know, it's open. It's in the outdoors. It's more welcoming than a house. People walk in, people come in, people feel more connected to each other. Also, the Talmud says, hypothetically, if you had a big enough sukkah, somebody could build a big enough sukkah and gather all the Jewish people together, the whole Jewish nation can dwell together in one single sukkah. I guess you could say all the Jewish people could be in one synagogue if you built a synagogue big enough. But that's not true of every mitzvah. We can't all eat the same piece of matzah. We can't all wear the same piece of pure film simultaneously. But we could all sit in the same sukkah and do the mitzvah of sukkah at the same time simultaneously. And one last thing about a sukkah is, you know, most mitzvot, you know, right now we're learning Torah. We're engaging our head, hopefully our hearts. But we're not necessarily engaging our legs or our hands in the mitzvah of study of Torah. Maybe if we use our hands once in a while, but it's primarily different parts of the body engage in different commandments, as opposed to the mitzvah of sukkah. When you walk into the sukkah, every part of your body, from the hair on your head to the nails on your toes, every part of your being is enveloped in the mitzvah. And again, this represents unity within the self, within the harmony within yourself. And we talked about harmony in the world, which we all pray for and strive for, to have a harmonious world, a peaceful world. But we also know you need harmony within yourself. And a matter of fact, it's very interesting. Someone once said, you know, if you walk into a house and things are chaotic, if your inner being is in a state of calm and neat, your internal being is organized and orderly, the disorder in the house disturbs you. But if you feel internally like everything is disturbed and unorderly, then you almost like to be in sync with an environment that's disorderly. It's like when you're depressed and everyone around you is happy, you become more depressed because, like, why is everyone so happy? Why aren't they miserable like me? But when you're happy, you see the happiness in the world. And we're very much like a mirror. And You know, when you're happy and everyone's sad, you're like, why is everyone so sad? Why aren't they happy? You want to be in sync with your outside world. So when we talk about harmony and peace in the world, there's some people who are rooting for lack of peace in the world, tragically. Some people like chaos in the world. We see this today, people rioting and creating chaos. And I think that the more harmonious you are internally, the more you want to see the world around you harmoniously, and vice versa. So Sukkot is really a big workshop that lasts about 8 or 9 days. And it ends with Simchat Torah, the happiest day of the year, because Sukkot is the happiest holiday. And then Simchat Torah taps it all off. And there's so much more to discuss. But I think we have enough to start thinking about the holiday, start learning about the holiday. And more importantly, ask yourself, how am I going to celebrate it? Do I have a sukkah I could build? Or if I can't build it, can I go to someone else's house to eat in the sukkah and do the mitzvah, make the blessing to eat in the sukkah? Do I have the 4 species that I call the synagogue to order my set? If not, where am I going to get one? Who could I use? Who could I borrow one from during the holiday to do the mitzvah? Because as we said, the most important thing is to do the mitzvah. And by doing the mitzvah, hopefully, God willing, will increase in our actual happiness. So I want to wish everyone a good day, a happy happy Sukkot. And we should see each other very soon, God willing. And as we move forward, let's hope and pray it's a new year and that we'll see more happiness in the coming year, more health in the coming year, which of course will bring more happiness. And may this holiday usher in permanent happiness as we put this pandemic, hopefully every day a little bit further behind us, and move into a brighter, better time for us, for our families, for our nation, for the world. And let us pray that we know, we trust that God has a lot of blessings. Just like last year was filled with a lot of unpleasant surprises, this year it's going to be filled with pleasant surprises. So I wish you all a good, happy holiday Sukkot, and look forward to seeing you all very soon. And thank you so much for joining on this first Torah class since Yom Kippur. So it's the first class for the new year, post high holidays. Wishing everyone a beautiful day, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. It's always a pleasure to study with each and every one of you. And if there's anything the shul can do for you, just let us know, okay?
Thank you very much.
All the best.